conversation. I find when we do these kind of Zoom classes, sometimes people are traveling while they're listening to it, or they're distracted or whatever. So I am going to email you guys the presentation afterwards. So make sure you give me your email address, and then I will be sure to email you the presentation afterwards. Okay, let's go to the first slide. Okay, so can you guys see it clearly, the slide? Is it big enough?
It's small,
It
but
is.
yeah, it is small. Question, can we email you in the chat box?
There is a chat box, and I do have that up on my other monitor. So yeah, you can put your email in there, and then I'll make sure I grab it before we end the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, otherwise you can, or you can email me, deb@appraisalcare.com. You can email me the request for the slideshow. And so right now what I'm showing you is a Facebook group that I created for real estate agents. It's called Appraisal Answers for Real Estate Agents. So if you haven't already joined that, you might want to join that because it's a great place for you to just come in there anytime and just ask any appraisal questions that you have. And, you know, I like to share information when I'm going about doing jobs with you agents. And sometimes I learn a lot from you guys too about what's going on, you know, currently in the market, because things are changing all the time. So it's good for us to all, you know, communicate and keep up with each other. So, so that was what I did, you know, to kind of help communication between appraisers and real estate agents. And the reason I started teaching this CMA class was because I started noticing over the last several years that lenders are really relaxing the requirements for appraisals. I mean, they're waiving them. They're actually, that's on the next slide. I think it's going to show what the different ones are. But the reason why they're relaxing them, let me start with that, is because they're trying to speed up the loan process. They're trying to save money. That's, you know, they say save money. But really in the long run, I don't think it's saving anybody any money with some of these changes they've made. And, you know, they're saying that they've been saying for years there's a shortage of appraisers. Well, there really wasn't a shortage of appraisers. We all are getting older in age at this point, and there hasn't been a lot of incentives, though, for new people to come into the industry because of the way lenders treat us and stuff. So it's really, you know, there hasn't been a lot of new people coming in. So now with the interest rate so low, there really is a shortage of appraisers. And so it's probably helpful that they are doing some of the things that they're doing so that, you know, we can, you know, get the loans going and get the economy moving. So what they're doing, these are some of the most recent things that they're doing with appraisals, is they're doing these property inspection waivers. They're doing quite a lot of those. I think one lender told me they are doing about 70% waivers where no appraisal has to be done. And that's, you know, that can be on sales, refinances. There's also, they've made the appraisals a lot more flexible during this COVID-19 thing, which could present some problems too, because, you know, if we're not inspecting the properties, you know, we might be missing quite a lot. So, you know, there's, I actually don't work with, I haven't had one lender even allow me to do, though, honestly, one of these like modified appraisals, as far as, you know, doing a desktop appraisal in lieu of doing a full appraisal, or doing a drive-by. I did do one drive-by appraisal because it was on an FHA appraisal and the homeowner did not let me in when I got there. And I could tell he was probably just nervous because this was right around when COVID first started. And I think he just wasn't sure about, you know, and he had his kids home and everything. And so, you know, I told him, look, I have enough information on your property because he had purchased it a couple of years before. So there was plenty of MLS photos and it was all remodeled when he bought it. So I could tell it was in decent shape. So I said, look, I'm going to go ahead and just do the exterior of your house. And then I'm going to ask the lender for an exception and see if they'll accept a drive-by. And so the lender did accept that. But in most cases, I'm going ahead and just doing full appraisals right now. And I just take all the precautions, you know, of wearing the gloves and the mask and booties in the house and all that, and just having them kind of get the house ready for me so that I don't have to touch anything in the house if possible. So hybrid appraisals is another one that they've been testing out for the last 2 years. And this is where, an unlicensed appraiser can go out and do the inspection, and then they supply all the photos and everything and the inspection data to the appraiser. And then the appraiser takes full responsibility for coming up with the value and everything. And, they get paid very little to do it. So there's not many appraisers that are willing to do this for such little money, and then also have such liability. So I really don't think these hybrid appraisals are going to really last too long, because we're also finding that it's actually taking us longer. If we don't do the inspection and we're relying on someone else's information, we end up with so many more questions. And so it takes us a lot of time to get all that additional information and get our questions answered. There's also these virtual inspections. I'm not sure if I put that on the slide or not, but for the COVID-19, they're allowing like these virtual inspections. And again, we can't really do those unless we have enough reliable data to really be able to appropriately appraise the property. So there's also the AVMs, the automated valuation modules, which is basically like, Zillow, and we know how accurate that is. So, this has all been going on for several years now. And, I've had people hire me that, for instance, their lender has said, they did an AVM, but the value was so low, and the homeowner was adamant that their value was higher. And so the lender said, well, go, you can go ahead and get your own appraisal then. So then they'll do that. And another thing I wanted to point out to you guys about, who does the appraisal protect? It only protects the person who pays for the appraisal, or the user of the report. And we always specifically point that out in the appraisals. So for instance, an appraisal that a lender orders only protects them. It doesn't protect the buyer. It doesn't protect the agents. So just be aware of that, because I think a lot of people think that they can use the appraisals that we do for lenders in court and things like that. And it really belongs only to the lender. It's to protect them. So if you want protection, you have to get an independent appraisal, basically, is what I'm saying. So another reason why I started teaching these classes is because I became an expert witness, and I started getting a lot of jobs. I started getting a lot of real estate agents hiring me to be an expert witness that were getting sued. And a lot of times, like, they were not even at fault, and yet they had to come up with all this money to defend themselves. And even if, and then they would run out, they'd get tired of fighting. And so then a lot of times they just end up settling, and they'd still have to pay quite a lot of money just to settle. But like, settling is sometimes cheaper than going to court. So what I'm trying to do is help you guys avoid even being sued, okay, by just educating you on, how to value the properties in the first place, price them right. And then there are ways that you can, encourage the buyers to also get an independent appraisal. And that also helps them. It helps protect you and them. Because if an appraisal is not done, then they're going to look at you as you're going to be the value expert. So that's in the courts, they're going to look at you as the value expert. So you always want to make sure that, if possible, that you can get an independent on every transaction, that there's an independent, non-partial appraiser, doing an appraisal on it. So I don't know if you guys can read this. Can you read my slides? Is it big enough?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, here's basically just some lawsuit claims, percentages of what, what agents get sued for and stuff like that, what the percentage of lawsuits are involving real estate, typically. And this came from my E&O insurance company. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then also, they pointed out that the number one most common error for residential and commercial claims is square footage. So, you know, a lot of real estate agents will actually hire me before they even put a property on the market to measure the house if there's like a discrepancy on the square footage. And that's definitely something that will help you clear, you know, if you can get that cleared up before it even goes on the market, it can save everybody a lot of grief, because I've seen people get tied up in escrow and then they don't find out till they get the appraisal that the house is really not as big as they thought it was. And then sometimes the buyer doesn't want it anymore because it's smaller than they thought it was. And they're also probably paying more for it because they thought, you know, it was priced more like a home that was larger. So, you know, they either have to renegotiate or sometimes the deal just falls through. So, you know, it's good to just get that cleared up right in the beginning. And I honestly don't know why the appraisal isn't required before a transaction even starts, instead of waiting till the very last minute, right before it's about ready to close. And then that's when they order the appraisal. And, you know, just too many things can come up on an appraisal that can, you know, affect the deal. So it just seems kind of backwards to me. So, you know, like I said, some real estate agents do go ahead and get a pre-listing appraisal ahead of time so that they know what kind of things they might be facing once they get into escrow. So I think I already kind of talked about this. Okay, so now we're going to get into the meat of, you know, how I come up with the value, and so that you guys can kind of understand, you know, more of how to do your CMAs. So, you know, you want to find comparable sales that are most like your property, obviously. You know, with unique properties, that can be kind of challenging. But, you know, you want to start with the basics, just, you know, and a lot of this probably seems obvious to you guys and everything. You know, you want to start with like, you know, just most similar as you can in size. Basically, that's the first step. Make sure you've got similar in size comps, because I do see a lot of agents providing me with comps that are, you know, really different in size, or they might include, maybe the square footage includes an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. So there's inaccuracies in the data. So, you know, that can throw you off also. So that is why we, you know, have to dive deep. Once we do our comp selection, then we've got to dive in deep and try to verify how accurate is some of this information. So here's some Fannie Mae guidelines. So we've got Fannie Mae guidelines, and then we have these federal guidelines called USPAP. And we also have lender guidelines, okay? So the most important thing I find before I even get started on an appraisal is finding out what the zoning is. Because if you've got an unusual zoning, let's say it's zoned for commercial, but it's a residential property. So you're gonna wanna make sure you get a comp that has commercial zoning and has a residential property on it, okay? Because that shows market acceptance. Because we are really supposed to appraise the property at its highest and best use. So we have to figure out, is the highest use as a commercial property, or is it as a residential property? Typically, we find that commercial properties sell for less than residential. So I've never had a residential property that was zoned commercial that ended up having to be appraised as a commercial property. I mean, it doesn't mean it can't happen. If I had something like that, if I thought the value would be higher as a commercial property, I would refer that to a commercial appraiser, because I specialize in residential. But most of the time when I get an assignment like that, I can find comparables that have a similar situation. Okay, so, you know, and basically the comps, you want them to be comps that the buyer would also consider, you know, not something completely different. Like sometimes I find that agents will give me comps that are, it's like I'm comparing apples to oranges. Okay, so you want to make sure it's, you know, similar to what, you know, the buyer would, you know, I mean, they're not going to go from, you know, like, let's say they're looking for a 1,500 square foot home. They're not going to, like, you know, want a 3,000 square foot home necessarily, because maybe they don't want that big of a home because of the cost of maintenance and you know, whatever. There's different reasons for that. So, okay, so a lot of lenders, here's the lender guidelines. Okay, a lot of times they want us to stay within a mile with the comps. Doesn't mean we can't go over a mile, but we just have to explain why we went over a mile, okay? And you don't want to ignore comps that are close by and use ones that, you know, are more than a mile, okay? If there's good comps that are close by, you definitely want to use those. But there might be a reason why you want to use one more than a mile away, because maybe there's something unique about the house that you can't find any comps close by that have that. And so you've got to go farther out and try to find that particular feature. A lot of times they want, you know, to close sales within 90 days. And like I said, too, this is not, all this is not set in stone. We just have to explain if we can't follow these guidelines. And we can't ignore anything, you know, I mean, because they're going to, you know, a lot of times these are reviewed, our appraisals are reviewed. So, you know, they'll come back to us later and challenge us on things. You know, they always want 2 active or pending sales. Pending sales are going to be the best for us because that's going to show, a lot of times when I have a pending sale in the report, I can call the agent and find out what it actually sold for. They're not always willing to give me the sales price, but just by interviewing them, sometimes I can kind of get an idea if it sold above list price, if it sold below, you know, how did they get multiple offers? Kind of helps me figure out what's going on in the current market, okay? So that's why they want the active listings and pending sales in the report, because they want to see what's going on. Is the market going, you know, doing a downturn? Is it going up? We have to try to make sense of that. So, now, if it's a condo, a lot of times they'll want 2 sales inside the complex and 1 outside. Sometimes they want 2 outside the complex. Now, if it's a really small condo complex, there might not be any recent sales in the complex, and we would have to use all outside the complex. But we would still want to go back in time and just see, when that happens to me, I go back in time and I see what have they historically sold for. So that I can get an idea of, what would be the maximum that anybody's ever paid for this particular in this particular project, and maybe compare it to what people in a competing project would have paid back in that time too, to see if they're comparable. So bedroom count is pretty important if you're going from like a 2-bedroom to comparing a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom. Okay, when you're comparing a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom, not as much of a big deal because some people would rather have a larger 3-bedroom home than a smaller 4-bedroom home. Or, you know, have the rooms be bigger, have bigger bedrooms and only have 3 than to have 4 smaller bedrooms. So I don't really usually find much of a difference in the prices between, you know, going from a 3-bedroom to 4-bedroom or a 4-bedroom to 5-bedroom. But, and even sometimes there's not much of a difference going from 2 to 3 bedrooms because some 2-bedrooms have a den. And so there is potential for there to be a 3rd bedroom. So that's, you know, kind of the details that we have to look into once we start diving in, once we get our comps kind of narrowed down. So any amenities like pools, guest houses, unpermitted additions, converted garages, we have to find another comparable that has those to show market acceptance. Because if we don't, the lender will most likely not want us to give value for it, and they may even require them to remove it if it's something like a converted garage or something like that. Let's see what else. So here's another thing that I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the rent control in California now, but I wanted to throw this out to you guys because it could have an effect on the value of the properties. So, you know, most of your 1-unit properties are not going to be affected by the California rent control. unless they are owned by a corporation, okay? So, but sometimes it's hard to tell if they're owned by a corporation. So, that's an extra level of research that we have to now do. And the reason, the effect of the value is because there are, with this rent control, there are, depending on how long the tenant has been in there, you may have to pay to relocate the tenant if you remove them, due to no fault of their own. So, I find when I'm appraising a lot of 2 to 4 unit properties, sometimes there's some long-term tenants in there that are renting below market value. Okay, and that can have an effect on the value. It may sell for less due to the fact that, depending on how long the client's been there and how it falls into the rent control, it could cost, them more money in the long run. So I don't know if I'm making sense. I feel like I'm rambling here, but I didn't want to get too detailed about the rent control, the specifics of it. If you guys have any questions about that later, I'll be happy to share with you the specifics of it. But just be aware that it's just something that you should be aware of, how long the tenants have been there. And also the other factor is if there's rent control in the city jurisdiction, then the rent control for the city is primary, and then state rent control is secondary. So you would have to follow the rent guidelines for what the city is saying first, and then anything not covered by the city you would then look at what the state is saying for rent control. All right, so when we're choosing our comps too, one thing that lenders like us to do is they like us to bracket. So by bracketing, what I'm talking about is, let's say our sales price, like here you can see the sales price is $399, and they would want actual sales prices of my comps to be, they would want me to have some higher and some lower than my actual sales price, okay? They would actually like my value to also not be higher than any of those actual sales prices or lower. So that's another thing that we have to kind of consider. They like us to bracket, the lot size, the square footage of the house. They like us to have similar, bedroom and bath count with at least one comp. And this isn't always easy to do. And like I said before, none of this is all set in stone. I mean, there's times where you just can't do this. I even had such a hard time even coming up with an example of bracketing the sales prices just for the CMA class, because it's not that easy to do really. And so we just have to explain when we can't do that. So basically when I'm doing a search in the MLS for my comps, I don't ever look at price per square footage, because that doesn't, consider the, all the individual features of the property. And that's where we get into comparing apples and oranges. They could be completely 2 different properties, but have similar price per square footage. So that's just something you might want to keep in mind if you're providing comps to an appraiser. They're not going to care about price per square foot. So here's a comp search. Looks like I did. And this is an example that I was showing of how a property can be, 2 properties can be so different yet have a similar price per square footage. The reason I added this into my CMA class was because I actually had an agent. One time I was doing like a 5,000 square foot home in Downey, and it was in an area where most of the homes were about 1,000 square feet. And, it was kind of a high sale for the area. And yeah, I had to go a little bit farther to get comps that were as big as it. And the agent supplied me with comps that were 1,000 square feet because they had a similar price per square footage. They supported the price per square footage that the property was selling for. And so I explained to her, I said, you know, I can't compare a 5,000 square foot home with a 1,000 square foot home, okay? Because those are not the same buyers, okay? So this is just an example of how, you know, that just how that can happen. So here's a house that sold for $920 and a house that sold for $755, and you know, they're different sizes, and they're different. I think they're in the same area. Actually, 35. One is in Cal Heights. This top one's in Cal Heights, and the other one is above Cal Heights. So they're kind of in a little bit of a different neighborhood, but they're still comparable neighborhoods. I think one of them had this one has a pool down here. So, I mean, some people might not even want a pool. So, you know, that's another thing that we have to consider. So when I'm pulling my comps, I want to make sure that I am comparing that the comps are in a comparable neighborhood, okay? Sometimes you don't have enough comps in your neighborhood and you may have to go outside the neighborhood. So, and another thing, lenders don't like us to go across boundaries, okay? They don't really like us to go on the other side of freeways if we don't have to. So that's another thing that we have to try to consider. But there are times when my comps on the other side of the freeway are actually better than the ones on the same side of the freeway with me. So let me see here. So it's important to know the differences in the different, you know, neighborhoods around you, and you can quickly see that by doing some searches and just, you know, getting averages for the neighborhoods, which I'm going to go over in a minute. But let's see here. Let me see what the next one is. Okay, so, you know, same school district, we would want to try to make sure that we get some comps in the same school district, but not everybody does buy for the school district. So keep that in mind. And there are times when I have to use comps in another school district, and that's okay, because it's because I don't have enough comps in my school district that are similar enough. And so I'll get as many in the school districts as I can, but then I will also maybe get one outside the school district that has some of the features that the property I'm appraising has, okay? So, and also we always want to stay in the same subdivision or condo complex if we can, even if we have to go back older in time and like throw an older one in there. We definitely want to see what's been happening in that same subdivision. Sometimes my search might be a whole town if it's a really unique property. And sometimes I have to go outside the city and get comps in the neighboring city. So there are a lot of neighborhoods where the same builder built in two different cities that are side by side. And so sometimes you will find very similar comps in the neighboring city, especially if the property is located like on the border in between two cities. So, okay. So another thing you want to look at is, you know, how long have these properties been on the market? Because that tells us a lot. When I start looking at the days on market, you know, I can tell easily if, you know, why something has been on the market so long, you know, by pulling the listing history. I can see that, oh, okay, well, it was originally listed for, you know, 500,000, and they had 3 price reductions, and then it went into escrow like, you know, 30 days after the last price reduction. Sometimes I can't really tell why it's been on the market so long, so I will call the real estate agent and try to get some insight on why that was. And a lot of times it has to do nothing with I mean, I would have never known what the reason was unless I called the agent. Sometimes it's just there was a difficult tenant in there that wasn't allowing it to be shown. Sometimes, you know, the seller just wasn't that motivated. I mean, it could be a number of reasons. Okay, so there might be something wrong with the property too, that they're not putting in the MLS. So that's another thing that I sometimes find out by calling real estate agents. So a lot of people ask me, you know, what happens if I don't have enough recent sales that are similar to the property? I mean, I've gone up to 3 years back. And then you can just make time adjustments. Okay, and I'm going to show you how you do that. So let me see what else. So yeah, that's just, I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys right now. Let me go to the next one. So I guess to narrow down, you know, sometimes you come up with an overwhelming amount of comps and then you've got to try to narrow them down. Okay, so this is when you start, you know, asking yourself these questions. What's the most important feature of the property? And so you'll want to focus on comps that have that feature. If it's a particular style that's unique, you want to make sure you try to find something with that style. Is it the age of it? Sometimes it's a newer construction than most of what has been selling around it. So it could be a challenge finding, you know, a home that was a similar year built. So you want to try to do that in, you know, in your search. There's a way that in the MLS search, you can do like a wildcard search for specific things to look for specific features. And that's what I do a lot of times when I'm looking for something unique. Let's say I'm looking for a comp that has an ADU. Then I'll do, in the MLS search, I'll put an asterisk, and then put ADU, and then an asterisk in the public remarks or the private remarks in the MLS. And I'll spell it different ways. I'll put either 80, you know, you can do your search several different ways to see what comes up that might have those features that you're looking for. Otherwise, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack sometimes. If you have to go through all the MLS comps and read through all the comments, it can be really difficult to find comps that have a certain something that you're looking for. Okay, so in this example, let's see here. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I had a hypothetical situation where I'm appraising an 1,800 square foot home, and it is built in 1938. It has 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. And so when I start my search in the MLS, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, I'm going to look for all single family residences, and I might put an area in there, or typically what I like to do instead of putting the area is I like to actually do a map search. I draw the boundaries of the neighborhood that I want to search, because I found that a lot of real estate agents do not put the correct area in the MLS, or they don't know what the area is. And so you could be missing a really good comp by just searching by area. Okay, so I do my searches all different ways until I'm satisfied that I have not missed a thing. So in this case of, you know, appraising a 4-bedroom home, I would search for anything with 3+ bedrooms. And then I would make my search criteria, the square footage, be within a range of 25. I would start with 25 square foot lower and 25% higher than the square footage of the property I'm appraising. Now, I may get too many comps doing that, and I may have to narrow it down further to maybe a 15% difference. But I don't want to miss a comp that might be next door or on my same street. So I want to start out with, you know, a bigger range, and then I'll narrow down from there. Okay, let's see. So here's an example of, let's say you've got a house, like I'm appraising, let's say a house right here in Virginia Country Club or Los Cerritos area is what they call this area. And I don't have enough comps though. And so I'm wondering, okay, can I get some comps from over here in these areas? Or it could be the opposite. I could be appraising a property over here and I'm wondering, can I get some comps over here? Well, by searching, by doing a search, I was able to see that, okay, look, there's a definite difference in prices for similar square footage in these two different areas. So I definitely want to avoid using comps from these, different neighborhoods. Unless it's, like I said, you've got to have a really good reason and it's a really unique property. And there's, there are cases where I have had to, do that. But I keep in mind that, these typically go for less over here, okay? And the reason why is because these, are situated around a golf course, and a lot of them have, bigger lot sizes and bigger homes. And so that's typically why they sell for more over here. Okay, let me see. So on this one, this is just, again, talking about like researching the days on the market, okay? I mean, it's probably not gonna, when you look at, okay, these are all closed sales and, this is quite a range of sales prices right here. These are all in the same area and they're all pretty similar in size, but they're ranging in price from $500,000 to $995,000. So, why are they so different? That's what we have to look into. And why is this one for $965,000? Why was it on the market for 106 days? Okay. It may have, maybe it's sold for more because it's a really unique property. And so it took longer to sell. We don't know unless we do some more research and figure that out. And it might not be a good comp because maybe it's an outlier or an oddball. So that's what, another thing we have to do is if there's just like a really odd sale that is really standing out as being super high or super low, we may have to just throw that out. And, but we want to make sure first that we do a little research on it and make sure, try to find out why did it sell higher or why did it sell lower? So that, because the lender may come back to us later and find, want to know why did we ignore that sale? Okay, so here's another thing. We got to find out if some of these sales are arm's length transactions, probates, foreclosures, short sales. I mean, some of this could be reasons why they're selling for lower, there was some kind of, it was some kind of distress sale. Oh, and also flips, sometimes the flips are done really poorly. And so they're going to sell a little less than, especially in a historical neighborhood, like where I live in Cal Heights. And, if somebody goes and flips a home and doesn't do it right in this neighborhood, it's probably not going to sell for as much as a home that was done right because it's a historical neighborhood and we're supposed to be preserving the characteristics of the properties here. So that is something to also keep in mind, the different quality of the improvements that the properties have. So there's also different styles of homes and, you want to try to stay within, you want to try to find like styled homes, obviously, but that's not always possible because you're also trying to find homes that are similar in size, homes that have a similar location. There's so many things that we're trying to cover. So, you have to just try to think of what would a buyer that is looking for a craftsman bungalow, what would they find acceptable as a replacement. You know, and sometimes it just comes down to, you know, the years that they were built, you know, maybe similar year built, might have similar quality and similar characteristics. So, you know, definitely in some neighborhoods, like Spanish style homes will sell for more than a traditional style home. So that's just something to be aware of. And then craftsman style homes, there's a lot of upkeep on those because of all the woodwork. It can be very expensive to maintain those. So that's another thing to keep in mind on those. Okay, I already talked about how I would, with the square footage, when I'm doing my search, I always try to go 25% lower and higher on my comp search. So this is just getting back to that. I guess another example of if you had a 1,200 square foot home, then you would want to do your range from 900 to 1,500 square foot in the beginning when you first do your search. I don't usually put age as a search criteria in my MLS search, unless it is a unique age. Okay, so most neighborhoods have pretty consistent age built homes, but not always. I mean, we live in this is a pretty diverse area here in Long Beach and Lakewood, and well, not Lakewood, but Long Beach. It can be very diverse. So there's going to be, you know, you could have some newer homes next to some older homes, and, you know, just all different kinds of eclectic differences in the properties. So trying to narrow it down by age can sometimes just, you know, it just doesn't always work unless you're, like I said, you have a specific type of property that is unique to the area or unique age of the area. And you're just trying to see, well, where is another area that has these age of homes that might be similar? And so you've got to just expand your boundaries, your search boundaries, to try to find that. Because there are houses that, you know, for instance, have like burned down. And so then they built a new house. So that's going to be newer than all the homes around them. So that makes it really hard to find a home that's similar age, obviously. And so you would have to go, you know, farther away to get those comps. Okay, so going back to what do we do if we don't have enough recent sales? You know, we can go back in time. So I would first start my search with just going back a year. Anytime I first start a search, I always just go back a year and see what's been going on in the last year. If I get too many comps, then I'll narrow it down to what's been going on in the last 6 months. Okay, but if I have a real shortage of comps that are similar to what I'm appraising, you know, I'll expand it to 2 years and then 3 years if I have to. And then I might have to do a paired sales analysis to see what was going on back then. And I would also have to see what was the median prices doing back then. Were they going up or down? So that I can try to figure out what my time adjustment would be then. Because obviously, you know, in an appreciating market, you know, if I use a comp that was 3 years ago, it probably sold for a lot less. But if I can make a time adjustment, a lot of times then it makes sense that, okay, if it was selling today, this is what it would sell for. So what I use a lot of times and I find very useful is InfoSparks on in the MLS. We all have access to this. I find it to be a really useful tool, and I know a lot of people aren't even aware it's there. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up to you guys, because you might want to use this to compare different neighborhoods for your buyers. There's a lot of different things you can use it for. So, and when you do the search in there, there's different ways that you can try to determine what the market has been doing, okay? You've got, you can create these charts where if you do these bar charts, you can go back 3 years. Well, there's times where I have to go back maybe 10 years because people hire me to do appraisals for they want a value from 10 years back. And so I have to figure out what was the market doing 10 years ago. So if you do these kind of graphs in InfoSparks, you can actually pinpoint a specific date and time and find out what the median price is. And then you just have to do the math then and find out, let's see, I think the math's on the next page possibly, but basically, let's say if I'm going on this one, I'm showing a pinpoint there that I put of November 2015. So it's showing that the entire MLS, the median price was $479,850. In Bixby Knowles, the median price was $739 as of that date. So let's say I'm appraising something as of November 15th. Or let's say I'm appraising something at the current date, but I have this great comp that was from November 2015. So I can see that that was definitely a high point in the market. But if, let's say I'm appraising it at this point, it seems like they're pretty comparable. The prices were pretty comparable, the median price in these 2 point periods, okay? If I'm going to use a comp that's, down here, then I've got to figure out, okay, what, figure out the median price at that point and this point and how many months in between, and then do my calculations based on the difference between the, for instance, let's say, oh God, I feel like I'm not making sense here. I need to, let me go to the next slide and see if it shows you the math. Let me see. Okay, so here it is. Okay. Well, wait a minute. Let me see here. Okay, so yeah, here I'm showing 3 different years, okay, of median prices. Okay, so let's say I'm doing an appraisal in 2018 and I'm using a comp from 2016. Then, the math that you do is, you take the 981,575, divide it by the 1711, and you've got a 16% increase for the year, or 1.33% per month. Okay, but is that median price? Well, yeah, on this example, I actually used averages because the MLS doesn't have medians. I pulled this from the MLS, and the MLS does not. It didn't allow me to use medians for this. But I typically use median sales price, and I have other ways of finding the median. But in this case, I used average because that's what's available to you guys, and so you can see that obviously something is kind of weird here about why did it all of a sudden go from 1,171,000 to 1,711,000. Well, sometimes it's just because there's very few sales in that time period. So it made the median seem higher, or maybe there was just an abundance of higher priced homes that sold during that period. So you want to just make sure that, you throw out anything that might be an outlier that's, just an anomaly. So hopefully that's making sense. Okay, so we already kind of talked about some of this. Okay, so the principle of substitution is something that we always have to consider, because let's say we have 2 homes next door to each other, and one is original condition and the other one is highly upgraded. Okay, so a lot of times somebody may, a buyer may not want to pay for all those improvements that the person that highly upgraded it did. Okay, and they may want to just buy the one that's original so that they can do their improvements their own way and get it for a better price. So we have to consider that if there's a like property for cheaper, then, you know, that we've got to consider that, because sometimes there's not that much of a difference either in the, I mean, things are sometimes overly upgraded. They're over improvements. And so people aren't going to want to pay for those over improvements. Okay. So that's just something that you've got to, and a lot of sellers have a hard time with that because they think that the price that they paid for the improvements equals value, and it doesn't. So you don't always get 100% return in the resale market for the improvements because, you know, different styles are changing all the time too. You know, what's in style right now may not be in style, you know, a couple of years from now, and people might not be in as much demand. Like, you know, I know it's been really popular in the last, you know, year or two to do like a lot of gray colors and white and all that. And it's like, you know, that's already starting to, you know, people are getting tired of that already. And, you know, so, you know, it's just something to consider that, the thing about amenities is people can change them. So we can't place too much weight on the improvements because of that. Okay. All right. So we don't typically base our comp search on sales prices. And the reason why is because lenders don't like us to really do that, because then it's like we're cherry picking for comps. So let's say I've got a property that's sold for 610. You know, I'm not going to just go and look for comps that sold for 610. I'm not even going to think about the sales prices. I'm just going to start with, like I said, square footage, you know, the area they're located, what kind of condition it's in, how many bedrooms and baths, you know, what kind of location it has. I'm going to look at all that first, okay? And not even think about the sales price at the minute. And there are even some appraisal management companies that require us to tell them what our search criteria was for our comparables. And they don't want to see that we have searched solely by sales price, or that was in our search criteria in any way. So that's just something I wanted to point out to you guys, because a lot of times people will just start their search with, you know, prices, and you could be missing a lot of stuff that way. Okay. So views are really difficult to determine a value. I get asked a lot, you know, how much would this view be, or, you know, and it's not that easy, because it really depends on the buyer, and views can change too. So that's another thing that we have to keep in mind. You know, there's some high-rise buildings going up in Long Beach that are now blocking other high-rise condo units' views. So, you know, people may have paid a premium in the past for the city view that now they no longer have, because there's now a high-rise building in front of them. So, and it can be really hard to determine the views unless you actually go inside a home, or if I see the virtual tour. I love being able to see a virtual tour, because that gives me a really good idea of what the view is, because it's really hard to tell when you're just looking at MLS photos, because some of the photos that agents put in there for views aren't even the view from inside the house or from the property. They're just like views of the neighborhood, you know, in the neighborhood, of things that are in the neighborhood, and they're not even, you know, from inside the property. And so we have to place a lot of our weight on, when it comes to the view, on what can be seen from inside the house. Sure, there might be a balcony that they have a view, you know, we'll consider that, but most of the value is going to be placed on what view can be seen from inside the property. So here's just some other things that, you know, we consider when we're looking for our comps. When it comes to pools and green improvements, you know, in those cases, a lot of times they don't get the full value in the resale market for those improvements. So, and like I said before, not everybody, you know, always wants a pool. So if I'm appraising a home with a pool, I want to make sure I get a comp with a pool. And if I'm appraising a home that doesn't have a pool, you know, I try to avoid using comps with a pool if possible, unless it's a really good comp in, you know, in other aspects. In some areas, it's expected to have a pool. So if your property that doesn't have a pool, that can actually be a negative. And then there's other areas where pools aren't typical, but this property I'm appraising has a pool, and it's in a neighborhood where no one else has a pool. It might be a lower income neighborhood where, you know, people don't want that maintenance expense. So that they may not get that much value for that pool. Also the condition of the pool. So there's a lot of factors that go into, you know, how much value we would give for a pool or green improvements. And as far as solar, there now is new guidelines from Fannie Mae where we cannot give value. It's always been that we couldn't give value to the solar if it was leased. Okay, but now they're also not allowing us to give value if there is still a loan, if there was a loan acquired to purchase the solar, because there could be a lien on the property. So whenever there's solar, I always ask for the contract, the solar contract, so that I can find out if it's owned or if it's leased, because there have been agents that have told me that solar was owned when in fact it was leased. And the only way I knew that was by looking at the contract. So, and I think they get confused sometimes because there are these power purchase agreements that sound like they've purchased it, but it's kind of one of those agreements where you can purchase it from them later on, but they haven't purchased it yet. And so one obvious way that I can tell if it's also a purchase system or leased is by asking them for their electric bills, because if they have an electric bill of, you know, that's more than a couple bucks or something, then chances are it is a lease system. Okay, so this is just kind of just if you want to make your adjustments in your CMA, explaining, it can be kind of confusing sometimes on how to do your adjustments. So this slide is just explaining to you whether you subtract or add for that feature. So, you know, you guys can look at this later. Like I said, I'm gonna give you guys these slides so that you can look at this later. And then you guys are always welcome to, you know, join my Facebook group. And, you know, anytime you have any questions or need help with anything, I'll be happy to help you. And so that's it on the slideshow. Let's see, we still have some time for questions if you guys have any questions. Let me see if there was any, let's see, was there any questions on the chat? Let's see if I can find that. Let's see. Okay, I'm trying to find the, I had it on my screen before, the, you guys had given me your email addresses, and now I can't find it. Let me see. Oops. Can you guys see my screen anymore? Yeah?
Yeah.
What's on there?
The PowerPoint, slide number 35.
Okay. Let me see here. Trying to find where I don't know if there was any questions in there. For some reason, I can't find it right now. Okay, well, did you guys have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
When do you think it's the best time to get an appraisal, right? Before everything starts, like when the seller put the house on the property, or when is the best time?
Well, I think that is a very good idea to do that prior to putting it on the market. Some sellers will hire me before they even get a real estate agent involved to do that. And some real estate agents hire me to do it. Because, you know, especially when a market is really, like right now, people are paying too much for the properties. And so you want to know, you don't want it to fall out of escrow. You know, you want to make sure the appraisal is going to come in at the price. Otherwise, you know, the sale might fall through. So yeah, especially with, you know, markets that are like that, you know, when you've got multiple offers on a property and there's so much competition and very little inventory.
So basically right now we like I'm trying to buy a property in Santa Monica, Brentwood area. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's the prices are very high, but as far as appraisal, usually it comes lower, much lower than the sales price. But as you mentioned, it's very difficult because it's very competitive and there's so many offers. Even maybe I'm pretty sure the other buyers, they know that the price is high. So how much we can rely on this appraisal? Like if there's like a $400,000 difference between what appraisal said and what is the sales price. So how we should go with this, especially if there is a loan involved?
Okay, so, well, you know, I have to say that not all properties sell for what they appraise for either, because in a market like this, because a lot of people are willing to pay more than it's worth because of, you know, there's just, you know, not much, many properties available right now. So, I mean, I actually had one in, let's see, on a golf course, and I appraised it for a pre-listing, and it was a really dated house and very unique location and very large. And it actually, they got a cash buyer that paid $400,000 more than what I appraised it for. So, I mean, it was good that the listing agent got the appraisal, because that, you know, I believe you have to share that with, once an appraisal is done, you have to share that with the buyer. It has to be disclosed. And so, you know, that way the guy knew, you know, willingly that he was paying more than it was worth, you know, and he can't come back later and say, you know, because since it was a cash sale, you know, typically an appraisal isn't done, you know, because usually it's the lenders that require the appraisal. So, you know, unless there's and so some agents do hire me to do appraisals for cash sales too. And like I said, because that helps protect them in case, so that they, you know, nobody can come back to them. And because who they're going to come after, you know, if they're going to do a lawsuit, they're going to come after whoever's got the E&O insurance, and whoever is, you know, if it's regarding the value, they're going to go after the appraiser, you know, unless there is no appraiser, and then they're going to go after you. But it's always going to be whoever's got the E&O insurance.
Okay, thank you.
I can't figure out how to see you guys all right now. I can't, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with this. Okay, here, maybe this is it. Okay. So it looks like, so I'm not sure who just asked me that question. Any other questions? Any other questions?
Are you asking me or are you asking?
Oh, I'm
everybody?
just asking anybody if there's any other questions.
Oh, okay. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, because I can't see all of you, because it looks like a lot of you are muted, and also I don't see you. I just see your name in there. So, hi. Okay, well, and if there's no other questions, then what I'm going to do is just go ahead and I need to find where your email addresses are. If you don't get an email from me with the slide presentation, then make sure to email me at deb@appraisalcare.com. And because right now I don't see the notes from the meeting where you guys all put your email addresses in there. I'm trying to figure out where that is and I don't see it.
Can you give the email address again, please?
Okay, it's deb@appraisalcare.com. So it's DEB@APPRAISALCARE.com.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so yeah, if there's no more questions, then I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And then hopefully I'll see you guys in the Facebook group. You just have to request to join it, and then I will let you in. So just make sure you say, you know, where you're from and all that, because, you know, I do research the people that want to join the groups to make sure that, you know, they actually will be, you know, a good fit for the group. Okay. So like what I'm saying is mostly real estate agents are in there and other people having to do with real estate. But sometimes I get requests for people to be on the group that have nothing to do with real estate. So, you know, they're not really going to be, I want people in there that are going to be able to contribute and be able to share information so that we can all do our jobs better. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great week, and I will hopefully see you in the Facebook group.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.